What y'all know about D&D? Welcome back to the channel, lads and ladies, and welcome to the first 5e Logue. This is my first experience with 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and when compared with the 3.5 that I'm familiar with, I find the same strengths and weaknesses that I've heard about before. A lot of things simplified and grouped together to make them easier to manage, and it definitely has less of a cognitive overload in terms of character design and branching paths and all that, at least from what I've experienced so far. So we set the stage. It was myself, Sam, David, and Mags, the usual suspects, gathered together for our inaugural 5th edition Fun Fest, and we did indeed have a blast. We gathered at Sam's house. He put the kids in the traditional sleeper hold. Just kidding. The kids were put to bed, and we set about the beautiful depravity that is Dungeons & Dragons, spending the vast majority of our time together tonight, or this morning now, making our characters and choosing our path. The emergent storytelling of Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games is definitely the number one factor that attracts me to the genre, and tonight was a great example of that. I began with the idea. Sam's building a bard, so why don't I build a bard too? And then I thought, I don't really want to steal Sam's thunder because I tend to try to maximize my characters, so I wouldn't want to end up building a better bard than Sam. Do you know what I'm saying? I wouldn't even want to give that impression. So my first idea to build a character of the same meme class that Sam was building, it sounded fun, but I didn't think it was going to work out, so I decided to look at the new races for 5th edition. Again, there's a lot of things that I'm familiar with from 3.5, but it's easily far too vast to really comprehend anyway, and the Pathfinder that I've been playing, the same sort of rules apply in terms of just the depth of content. I better carry on with this, though. I ended up making Francis, the Chadiator, a level 1 sorcerer, a dragonborn of the silver variety, a former gladiator, and a level 1, or I told you, level 1 sorcerer, obviously dragon origin magic. Alignment neutral good. And what else can I tell you? There are sections for personality traits, ideals. What's this last one? I can't quite. It's a little bit fuzzy on my player card here. Bonds, social bonds, I suppose, and flaws. So let me read those off for you. Personality traits. I am the Chadiator. So this is the character concept, something that I decided to try and flesh out in my head. What if there was a physically gifted sorcerer, just a thick chungus of a man, of a dragonborn man, if you will? Dovahkiin theme intensifies. And what if that man was, again, a former gladiator, a Chadiator, if you will, the apex predator in the ring, who really is a sorcerer that devotes their magical talent to being the thickest Chad they can possibly be. Ideals, gains, bonds. Fans, but few close personal connections. Flaws, narrow-minded, vain, self-centered, and cloistered. This character did not interact with the larger world very much. Sort of a big fish in a small pond kind of idea. His stats. We rolled for stats, rolling 4d6 and taking the best 3. So that would give you, in general, a fairly well spread out stat range, and we threw out any scores less than 10. After some racial bonuses and a certain feat that I'm sure I'll talk about in a minute, I ended up with a 20 strength, that is the maximum, a 14 dex, a 15 con, 12 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 16 charisma. Not bad stat distribution for a sorcerer, and ideal for a Chadiator. Other stats that some of which I'm familiar with, others are a little bit different for 5e. We have a +2 proficiency bonus. There's another idea where they're squishing things together to keep things simple, and I can get behind that. I ended up with an armor class of 16, which is not terrible for a spellcaster at level 1, +2 initiative, basic 30-foot move speed that ended up being reasonably important, 9 max hit points, and some skills. I'm proficient in Arcana, Athletics, Intimidation, and Performance, as you do as a Gladiator sorcerer. As a Dragonborn, I have access to a breath weapon and a 30-foot cone of cold once per rest that can deal 2d6 damage with a con save for half. I have a feat, Dragon Hide, that gives me +1 strength and 2 claw attacks that can deal a d4 plus strength damage. Not bad. Not bad at all. What else can I do? I have the Dragon Origin, which gives me a base 13 armor class when I'm not wearing armor, and another 1 hit point per level, which explains the 9 max hit points that I have. Getting 6 from Sorcerer, level 1, 2 from Con, and 1 from the Dragon Origin. What else can we learn about Francis the Chadiator? Other than he's something of a meme character, you may have noticed. Emergent storytelling, I tell you. One of the aspects of having the Gladiator background is I start with a disguise kit and knowledge on how to use it. Again, stage makeup is just as important as skill at gutting your opponents like a fish in an entertaining way. Also proficient with land vehicles, read Chariot, and I speak Draconic in addition to the Common that allows us to communicate with each other. I start my career with a pony and a small wagon because that's what I could afford. But I want you to imagine this growing in the short term into a chariot with horses, a backpack, a bedroll, and a trident that, because the dungeon master was so kind, I also happen to have proficiency in, even though a sorcerer normally is not proficient with a trident. This versatile weapon is a favorite among gladiators and chadiators alike, so he let me start with proficiency with the trident, which came in a little bit handy, but thankfully I didn't have to swing it around too much as anything other than a torch. But I digress. Starting off, a sorcerer can have 4 cantrips known Of course, unlimited casting per day on those, as you do with level 0 spells. Very nice. And 2 level 1 spells known, 2 level 1 spells per day. I decided to go with False Life and Shield for level 1 spells. False Life functioning in a similar way in 5th edition that it does in the other editions I'm familiar with, that being 1 hour of temporary extra hit points. Always nice to bring that HP count up to around fighter levels. Again, I have an image to uphold. Chadiator, you see. And Shield actually functions differently in 5th edition, where it is a reaction spell that you can choose to cast when you are hit by an attack that improves your armor class by 5 points until the end of your next turn, or the beginning of your next turn, I should say. So that's pretty neat. It's emergency armor class on demand, and a reaction spell is a new type of spell for 5th edition, and it functions the way you would assume. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, by the way. I'm not super familiar with 5th edition. Who else was at the table? We had Mags' character, Callista, called Kali, by people that know her name. She's a druid, a tiefling druid of all things, and chaotic good alignment, as you might expect. A little bit eccentric for a druid. And then she had some stats and a bunch of background stuff that, we'll probably explore more when she's not bleeding out. but I'm getting ahead of myself. We spent most of our time creating these characters and significantly less time destroying them. But we'll talk about that in a bit. Who else? We had Kelzin Gorefiend, Sam's character. As I mentioned, a level 1 bard, all according to the plan, with an investigator background and a drow of chaotic good alignment. Pretty well balanced stats with an 18 charisma, good for a bard, a 16 dexterity, which should give him some armor class, but he only ended up with a 14. And yet, if you play your cards right, you can do very well with the setup that he has, especially as a bard, a support class that everyone can appreciate, and one that has a great potential to grow in spellcasting power and overall balanced capabilities with some of the best skill distributions in the game, if I'm not mistaken. And indeed, with proficiency in acrobatics, deception, insight, investigation, performance, persuasion, and stealth, he will be very handy in the roleplay when he's not bleeding to death. But we'll get to that part. So, what happened after we made our characters? The Dungeon Master, David, who, by the way, did a great job of running the game tonight into this morning, wanted to introduce us to some 5th edition combat, and indeed, having created much more balanced, reasonable characters than we've played in our other campaigns, we were in for a bit of challenging combat where mistakes would be felt. So, he sort of just dropped us into this one because he did want to get us to a combat. He told us that the city had hired us to deal with a rampant rodent infestation. That's right, there are too many rats in the sewers. Sewer count +1. So, there were 2 entrances to the sewers that we were aware of, one near us and one at the edge of town. Kelsey, she rolled a medicine check and found out that some dead rats around one of the sewer grates had apparently died in terror, with their hearts having ruptured. Yuck. And we ended up indeed making our way into the sewers, going down the pipe, as it were, and yet this town had a generous enough sewer system that, surprise, surprise, there was room for us to stand and walk and wade into the action. Sam's character, the Drow Bard, and Mags's character, sorry, I'm horrible with names, as you'll probably notice, which is something I've built into my character. Like I said, he's self-centered, so he just sort of ignores the fact that other people have specific names. Thank you, random citizen. You're welcome. But Sam's character and Mags's character, who again, Tiefling Druid, 12 armor class, decided to lead the way, with my character in the rear, because their characters have dark vision, and Sam's character, being a drow, has light sensitivity, and I had cast light on my trident to use it as a light source. So I was ruining the mood, if you would, by having normal human type vision. So they led the way, they scouted ahead, and they were the first to encounter 2 huge writhing groups of rats. Rat swarms, apparently. The enemy monster groups, surprised our 2 forward characters and got a serious damage attack in on both Sam's and Mags's characters, and they were very hurt but still standing. I managed to get off a ray of frost in the beginning of the first full round of combat, having rolled a natural 20 for initiative and then rolling a 3 for my attack. I missed. Sam's character dodges an attack. Mags's character is then knocked unconscious, being unable to really do much of anything in that combat because she got jumped from that surprise round and then finished off with a second hard-hitting attack from those rat swarms. I cast Minor Illusion at the beginning of round 2 and decided to go with an image of a flaming cat. I mean, what's going to scare off these terrifying rat swarms if not a cat that's also on fire? Sam heals Mags and starts to back away from the combat, and the rats start to chase us down and attack. One of them dispels the illusion, and another one attacks the illusion as well, finding for itself that is not actually a flaming cat, those cheeky buggers who weren't afraid to attack my illusion. And let's see what happened next. What progressed from that point on was a series of things going from bad to worse. Max's character was bleeding out, making a save against death, and then failing a save against death, and the first to get to 3 is the one that occurs. You get knocked down, and you fail 3 saves against death, you die. So she was fighting for her life, knocked down in a sewer pipe that was filled with carnivorous, murderous rats, and yet they were occupied. Sam's character fighting, and the rats finally taking him down, knocking him to the ground, where his character would start to roll against death and begin bleeding out. And then my character, the Chadiator, decided to go with a little bit different tactic. I made the illusion of flames across the sewer between the 2 groups of rats, hopefully cutting one off from attacking myself and Sam's character. And then I eventually managed to use Ray of Frost and my breath weapon as, again, a Dovahkiin to take down the first group of rats. Mags's character stabilized, so she wasn't gonna die. She would instead get eaten alive by the second group of rats if I didn't manage to take them down. So I started targeting them with Ray of Frost, which is again a level 0 spell. It has a 60-foot range and deals a d8 cold damage, as well as slowing the enemy target's movement by 10 feet, which is not bad at all. And what else happened? Sam's character, again, as I mentioned, he got knocked down by one of the groups of rats, and I am completely... my character, Francis, is completely untrained in medicine, and yet I attempted to stabilize him once, a fail, and then again, a fail as he's making and failing these saves against death, and then he had one more roll before he would die, and it was my turn. I managed to roll high on an untrained medicine check to stop the bleeding, and I managed to stabilize him. And then we got to the point where Francis is carrying these 2 poor, hapless, squishy characters that got attacked by some very scary monsters. So, you know, you don't have to feel bad that you got knocked down, because those were some tough fights that we had there as level 1 characters against a couple of rat swarms. So I got to the point where I'm carrying them out of the sewers, and David was like, well, it's going to take you a while. I was like, I got a 20 strength. I'll just throw them over my shoulder. So I carried them out there. We ended up getting a little reward for our mission complete, and that was our first session of D&D 5e. Overall, a very enjoyable experience, and one that I hope to repeat again as soon as next Sunday night. So hopefully we'll be able to get together again and have some laughs and have some fun and make some memes. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this a little bit of a change of tack, and yet hopefully also we'll see some more D&D into the future. Catch you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.